Lucifer in the past has shown so many feats of creation tier, such as creating his own, almost dying while fighting Fenrir with the help of Michael to prevent the destruction of creation. Him being able to outbelieve the existence of the present so he won't be weaker than Garamas and Gyges. Him being able to hide his creation from the presence, and boy, you can really keep going. First impressive feat, which I do think this statement could be easily justified, is the fact Lucifer says he led the greatest war in creation, in which others are shades and reflections of, or rather, nothing in comparison to it. This statement is true because Lucifer had experienced both the past, as he literally was born at the dawn of time and he is the past. But not just that, but he has witnessed the birth of a new creation and absorbed its 20 billion light years and absorbed its 20 billion years of narratives before he can even blink. To put that into perspective, that new creation is the DC we have witnessed in so many years since like the birth of Superman, and yes, Lucifer does transcend the story of Superman. This is one feat which I am still explaining. The events in DC has the best follow-up, I must say. I think it may be better than Marvel a bit, to be honest. Let me point out something everyone missed, and I also did in the past too. I thought about over 100 comics leading up with everything happening in DC Comics to this day. For those who didn't realize this, but after Lucifer left creation which died, he then witnessed the birth of the new multiverse which Perpetua started. And that multiverse was referenced as 20 billion years ago. That's when she created the orrery, and Lucifer looked into the future 20 billions of it. So basically, the events of Justice League 2018 to what they're explaining of Perpetua 20 billion back, Lucifer experienced the birth of that multiverse 20 billion, that beginning start around when Perpetua was introduced. Like she was in the multiverse creating stuff, right? So that's when like she created the orrery per se, on which she had her children govern. Alright, you have Alpheus, the world forger, would walk within the darkness of creation as the world forger by populating the multiverse with infinite universes. You have Maranovu, who will monitor the universes, who will rise into the world, or the world orrery. And you have Mobius, who will be the opposite and guard the boundaries of creation. Right, Alpheus was actually creating universes on the orrery, but he did this in a place within the multiverse called the Peculiar, which most will later know as the House of Heroes today. And this is shown in the Crisis, as this was the only structure left after they had died the first time, because Perpetua left and everything started anew, but the structures and functions didn't change. Mobius declared existential war against Maranovu, which led to things like having crisis energy where matter and antimatter battled together, and this took place a million years after the cosmic raptor took her captive. The world forger figured out the darkness beneath him, which I think Perpetua knew about, but she didn't know of its true meaning because she didn't create such, and she called it an anomaly, and the dark multiverse was powerful enough to make Perpetua have fear, right? But Hecate did create it. This dark multiverse is so much larger than the light multiverse, but they serve equal functions. And that's when Barbatos started his madness. And let me make another thing clear which people miss. The prime earth of before, which was the only prime earth, but there are two now. Either way, the prime earth is a fiction of the sphere of the gods, meaning from the lower god sphere to the level of the source wall. Everything beyond the orrery has a necessary linkage to the orrery. and prime Earth is the core reason for everything existing, which is why Earth heroes are so powerful and the planet itself. Lucifer saw all this, yet in a later time says all this death metal, Justice League fight, Infinite Frontier and whatnot is merely war compared to what happened in heaven. Now, that alone places Lucifer, at least for now, to be on the level of the Chronicler, who is above the Quintessence, who can be argued above the hands, including Prime Perpetua, who still is below the tier of the Source, and is rivals to beings of the Source world like Yuga Khan, Merlin, and much more. Upside Down Man gets his power from the Source like Perpetua, but Perpetua did rent from the Overvoid. But that statement could just mean the Source, since the Overvoid doesn't even recognize infinite creations as anything, and the Source does its bidding. So they are around that tier, and Hecate is beyond that because she was the first burgeoning light of creation beyond even the concept of gods. And this is very impressive because she already has been proven to be above every magician. She created Upside Down Man and whatnot, and we know the sphere of the gods extends broad. The sphere of the gods extends is a broad statement, right? She did get played by lower gods, but still she controls belief within creation, and she is the collective unconscious which birthed these gods for her amusement. So the beliefs, the likes of these gods, which Lucifer went around pleading with for his wife to rest within the underworlds, are just alive because Hecate's essence is alive. And same can be said for creation, except Prime Earth, because creation itself revolves around such, and Hecate transcends the multiverse as a whole. For now, we have Lucifer at high Ultraversal Plus by going with the war feats, and him seeing creation from outside would be baseline boundless, which is very impressive. But let's go through other things to solidify this claim further. By the way, most feats from Lucifer 2000, except the ending of it, those were all high Ultraversal to high Ultraversal Plus feats. I mean, you can even argue way lower, and I want to address that now in this video, which would lead to the next step. So, one thing people forget is that the previous DC multiverse was likely either way bigger than the current or way smaller. Let's decipher it together. The creation the presence made was solely reflecting from a single earth to heaven, just like our universe now, where we have no idea if we are the only life or not. But biblically, we know that there's heaven and earth, which is supposedly omnipotent compared to our minds, but that was at the first few instances until we start seeing things like the endless. We know gods exist, and the cosmology starts going higher and higher to the point that DC actually, just like Marvel has now, DC has an infinite stacked planes of existence. But what helps DC recently to compete with this is mostly from the fifth dimension and sixth dimension, which would still be a lot weaker, but would still be higher to plus to an extent. You see, there is something called the creation myth, which has to do with gods and cosmology. The three brothers created the fundamentals of creation as they were born in God's image. They basically placed the fundamentals of energies to make things. Then you have Hecate, who basically exists beyond this grand plan of God, and created a force that is supposedly stronger than anything the light has to offer. And we know this because she also existed from the beginning itself. This isn't a situation of being created by God. Hecate is older than Lucifer because she was just pure light in the void around the still forming multiverse, which is what God was creating. Nothing actually existed, not God, and later Hecate was the one who created them, which includes heaven and hell, as she did all of these out of the light, and it all amuses her for fun. Even the magic used by humans is all Hecate's magic, which transcends creation itself. Hecate let the gods believe in whatever they pleased, as humanity strengthened the gods through their beliefs. And also, humanity also has existed since as early as possible, because it goes like this. God, who is in the presence but is the presence, created the multiverse from its outer shell. Then Hecate, which was the pure light of magic and beliefs, birthed the darkness beneath, birthed the gods fair, but she didn't birth humanity. Lucifer and his brothers would create stars and all that which the gods used, because as Hecate takes form, creation is done, and God has created the three brothers. So it's like multiple people working on a project, but they don't inherently relate with one another. And how do I know it wasn't the current creation Hecate was doing this in? Well, I told you earlier about the timing of the cosmos, and Perpetua was introduced as the first creator of that cosmos. And also Hecate has pretty much existed for long. The endless and the green already existed before the new cosmos, and they make use of magic, which is Hecate's power. Hecate makes use of the dreaming, and dream was also available since the dawn of time. So as the gods, so as the gods, but after Lucifer and Elaine joined all three creations, then a new one started with Perpetua and the hands. For those who don't get it by now, the presence isn't God beyond his creation. His creation failed as only his name kept it together, which anyone could rewrite, and when the presence left creation, then everything within his plan started to get weak, including Lucifer. And this is a very powerful thing. Unless you aren't created by him, or you don't necessarily transcend him, if you enter his creation, then his name passively gets written all over you, as even the smallest of particles has his name, Yahweh. And as Lucifer got weak, his creation started to fall, and the presence is literally just like Perpetua, but a lot more powerful. He's like the hands, but also a lot more powerful. He is the God that views over the source of all things, but he isn't the overvoid. The overall seer of all creations, if not even Lucifer and Elaine, won't be able to hide their creations from him, and he won't view them as significant, unlike the overvoid, which can't even notice an infinite existence on its, to show how useful or how useless an infinite number of DC multiverse is to the overmonitor. Now, DC actually has a lot of amps, to be honest, because one thing I've realized so far is that the fact that there are infinite multiverses on the overvoid, and actually everything are similar. All the multiverses have a similar nature, right? Very similar nature. It's either the source itself is extremely infinite, which means the source would be like a higher level of what the array of worlds is within the multiverse, where there be an infinite amount of DC multiverse, but within the source, right? And then the source is within the overvoid. Yeah, and I think that's actually how it is. But I would, go deep into all this in my second DC cosmology video, because I really have to do one. DC cosmology has so much potential to be insanely powerful, which is why I scale the sixth dimension and above very high. The presence creation was infinitely layered. Yeah, it was actually infinitely stacked. Lucifer's was also infinitely layered, and his creation is pure abstraction and abomination. Lucifer isn't even more powerful than Alien Belloc. They are very much relative, and Elaine was so much more powerful that she hid her creation from Lucifer and the presence. She also didn't get weak like Lucifer, and the presence handed his creation to her. Lucifer did the same, and she was the best person to handle multiple Hialto plus cosmologies casually. And Lucifer says they are looking at a new god, further implying the title God doesn't mean supreme, it means rule over something. And I go deeper into this in my presence video. This alone has set the standards for Lucifer's power, but let's go over more feats to show he is totally beyond creation on so many levels. Lucifer says he is the shaper of suns, and the universe does bend to his will, which is true. Lucifer says he flew into a black void, and this is before the presence molded it into form. But we know the presence laid out the prerequisites for what his children would make of such. And I think this black void would be the same void Jack walked in for centuries, which is between places beyond all places. Such actually should either be the dark multiverse, or I don't know what else it could possibly be. No realm in between DC is, in my years of reading, within the God sphere has such. Only Brahma, the black void of heaven, and the dark multiverse. Anyways, it was within creation, and I would leave it as the dark multiverse. Lucifer can still hide things from the presence even while weakened. That is impressive. Lucifer seems to have been staying on the overvoid within a pocket realm, and he pushed Jack back to creation. And he was about to follow, because if he doesn't, then he will cease to exist. Lucifer is still scared of what God can do, because Lucifer never really escaped the presence plan, and I did state this in my presence video. But Lucifer left his creation right, but Lucifer is an extension of God. Lucifer is like God's right hand, like a body part that is trying to act on its own when you aren't looking, but truly can never act on its own. It's like someone cuts you off your hand, doesn't change the fact it isn't yours, and the hand can't function properly while detached from its source of life support. Lucifer gets challenged by heaven because he went into the mortal plane. As I said, he jumped earlier, but his conversation alone makes planets metaphorical in existence, meaning they are nothing but theoretical ideas manifested themselves, basically concepts but not abstract. That's impressive, but even worse, God calls his creation just metaphor as he gives it to Elaine. This Lucifer is greatly weakened and all of creation realized, but still everything a weakened Lucifer can do is still what other beings in creation wish they could. I mean, even the purposeful aspects of the presence are weak compared to him, like Spectre, God's Wrath, Phantom Strangers, like DC's Jesus. Rugwell, who has taken Lucifer's position, can barely inflict damage on him, and that is God's vengeance, right? Lucifer is so powerful that Pharaoh tried killing Lucifer, so the story of him doing it can save his kingdom and his people won't starve. Now, what is the most impressive about everything is the fact that everything Lucifer did, it was aspects of him that did it. The Lucifer with long hair is the year 2000 version. The angel form is Lucifer before his plans. The one with the wings is the one I will talk about a bit more, and that version is around the same power level as Merlin. Lucifer falls into Brahma, yes, the sea of Brahma, and from there it is easy to escape the plan of God. This is just further proving to everyone who has this misconception from the Justice League Dark, if Brahma Pralaya is above the presence, yes, it's clearly also stated that you can totally escape. Like, I'm not talking about when Lucifer left creation but still just part of God. I'm talking about, bro, your arm gets cut off, it's been sent to a place, right, that you yourself has no reach over, and then your hand can still function without you. That is what the Sea of Brahma is. It's so much beyond what God and the presence represents in DC, right? It's just that high. Even the likes of Constantine fears Lucifer. That speaks volumes a lot, to be honest. At least, let's say, base Constantine, because Constantine is a beast. But it doesn't really change much, to be honest. But let's keep going. The Haunts fears Lucifer, but they're not scared of anything in creation, including the Lords of Order in their own realm. That's like going to Nabu's house to pick a fight. And the Lords of Order, especially Nabu, all skilled to pick high altiverse. So, bro, they could rip Etrigan apart. I mean, this is the same Dr. Fate who beats Constantine, made Swamp Thing run, and beat Phantom Stranger. What else do you need to hear? And you're talking about the Norse gods in DC. I think all these Norse gods in mythology are too powerful, because the Norse gods in Marvel, I'm pretty sure the casual Asgardian is easily high altiverse. I mean, they are, because of the placement of them in the cosmology. Same thing with the fucking gods in DC Comics. Like the Norse gods, They're OP as fuck, bro. Like, they're like the pinnacle of the cosmology. These people can go to the edge of creation just to hunt a fucking god. Like, what the hell? That is impressive. Well, let's keep going, man. This version of Lucifer ruled over hell for a very long time after the first creation ended. He seems to be constant rivals to magic users within the multiverse because Arthur could cut off his hand, and that's a huge feat on its own, damaging him. Lucifer is very hard to damage, especially outside creation. Only thing I have seen cut Lucifer is himself, while using the Moonlight Shard, which can open reality into the overvoid anytime. I think the source, right? Because the source and the overvoid can be easily misinterpreted, which I need to actually correct. Even sometimes I do misinterpret both of them, right? He did it in the Sea of Brahma, which is crazy, bro. But yet the ruler of hell, Lucifer, seems to be rivals of Arthur. Merlin at an old age had enough magic power to give Belial a spell that can end the universe. And in his prime, he was just above everyone, like one-shotting his brother Etrigan. And Etrigan is far from weak, because Etrigan is able to fight the likes of his father, who had usurped Hell's throne and could view in the infinite. To be in control of hell or heaven, then you are basically in control of creation. And to them, to then be in control of everything, then you need to take over Earth, which Belial set out for, as he needed the energies of Earth to destroy creation as a whole. Etrigan was able to finally use Excalibur to kill a wolf Lucifer, who is still the same power of Lucifer, but Belial was above him. Even the likes of Madame Xanadu, who can be argued a rival in magic to Constantine and Base Zatanna, says the fight between Etrigan and Belial was too powerful to get into, and Etrigan was able to win. The thing that is insane about Lucifer's power is that lesser versions of him are already high auto plus to baseline boundless, while his real form, which I spoke on earlier, that went into Brahma while weakened, was already enough power to take on the entire cosmos alone and still win. Lucifer in his strongest form to date is shown in Lucifer 2016, when he was able to cut down the presence and seemed relative to Elin Belloc. But you can argue that Lucifer in 2018 going into the Sea of Brahma could be that powerful, but the thing is that everything in DC Comics has like levels, right? So let's say the creation is like this, and the Sea of Brahma could have different levels to which you can fall into depending on which part of creation you are in. Where it would be really insane is when you go outside the source to go to the Sea of Brahma. But at the same time, this is impressive because I need to talk about the gods of DC, right? The gods in DC are not just limited to that little god sphere in terms of power. That's what people don't not understand. Some gods in DC have power beyond creation, which is clear. What these spheres in DC represents are just archetypal ideas of normal beings, like cherub, like for heaven, hell, apocalypse. You have like dark sides, parademons, which are autoversal. That is what the god sphere represent. But when you talk people like Darkseid, Skyfathers, Lucifer, the presence, they are beyond creation. And even this god, the god Lucifer went to speak to, was swimming in the Sea of Brahma. He's that powerful, and a weakened Lucifer, bro, could go there. That is insane. That is like already beyond whatever the Justice League Dark did put together, which had like, and I skilled Zatanna. Go check out my Zatanna video to get how powerful Zatanna is. That's like the greatest feat Zatanna has put, not even the Upside Down Man. And that is insane. You could easily argue Lucifer is even above God himself through that. I mean, that's the argument I actually use for Lucifer being above God, because the God himself is not on that level and Lucifer can get into such. But also you can say that Lucifer going into such does not mean he scales to such, right? Like I said, there are different levels. So I think the best logical explanation you can use to quantify that is that Lucifer got there, he could escape the God, but does not mean because the Sea of Brahma is an entirety of a being, not just that little aspect. So he containing that little aspect may not cause any harm, which is logical. But he doesn't scale to the entirety of Brahma. He didn't even fight anything that that had to do with Pralaya, like the Justice League Dark did. So you could still say his skills wherever I've been saying his skills so far, because saying his skills to the Sea of Brahma is a whole different level of power for Lucifer, man. Let's be honest there. So yeah, Lucifer is incredibly strong, to be honest. Also, Lucifer isn't above the endless. That's another thing. He has mentioned many times that death would consume him, that even the secret of the greater afterlife is beyond him and would consume them all. The time death tried to take Lucifer in the past, she didn't simply because Lucifer was not dead. It's not that hard to understand. He wasn't just dead. He was dying, but he is Lucifer. Why would the Basanos be able to kill the whole Lucifer? Is your brain working at all? Death was just literally there waiting for him, and Lucifer was just like, no, you cannot claim me, because he was not dead. It's not like death cannot take him. What the hell? I don't know where people get all these interpretations from without even thinking. As for dreams statements, which I have addressed a lot. Firstly, Lucifer hates Dream because Dream has challenged not just him, but all of hell, which is a creation level feat. With the likes of Belial and Etrigan being there, he challenged it, and Lucifer claims he will kill him one day. But even Lucifer dreams. That statement is a contradictory statement to multiple feats and statements, or is it the fact we have proven the likes of Hecate is not just older but also stronger than Lucifer, or worse, they are rivals? Yeah, Hecate is just a part of the dreaming. And the creation myth is nothing more than her doing, which the presence is below, but Lucifer is bound to creation as he is above it like God. But Hecate isn't, and same with the green, right? Worst comes to worst, you can say they are rivals, because it usually seems like that. And when I say rivals, I am talking about the embodies of Dream, which very empowers somewhat like Lucifer's avatars, and Dream has a lot more personas than Lucifer. In fact, Dream's avatar has created everything in creation and a bit beyond, like the falling stars. None of Lucifer's avatars have done that. The strongest of Lucifer's avatars is the one with the long hair, which was Lucifer in 2000, and his best feat is rivaling that, right? And Lucifer in his true form is above what I just mentioned on a version of Dream did, clearly, because it is a true form, even though that Lucifer was weak. Now, is Lucifer the strongest in DC? The answer is actually arguably yes, but he would be switching in and out with people like Elin Belloc, God Swamp Thing, Synchronicity, Constantine, True Belief, Satana, Highest Embody of the Endless, The Presence, and Animal Man Body Baker of the Yggdrasil and the Totem. But many who say second strongest in DC don't realize that after the Source, you have Pralaya, the True Green, you have the Overvoid as a whole, and beyond the Overvoid, you have something called the Unknowable. Well, which is then you start mentioning things like the Eonimus, the Oversphere, the Filth, the Crack, and likely the Leviathan of stories. Lucifer is far from top 10 strongest in DC Comics. Lucifer does scale max to baseline boundless, but most of his feats are high out to plus, which is his consistency. So Lucifer at his peak, like his true form is already dragging it out with an avatar of Dream of the Endless. Think about that. The Endless are a lot more powerful than what people think. I have done an Endless video, you can watch it. If you want to debate me on how powerful the Endless are, sure, you can go ahead. I don't even need to make complex arguments, I just need to pull the scans from the comics if you don't want to use your brain, right? So this video is the last time I'm going to talk about Lucifer. Whatever you want to do with the information, you could be ignorant and contradict things a lot to suit your agenda, or you could just use a fucking brain. Well, if you found this video informative, please do share, like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, see you all next time. Peace.